Nathan Calloway had spent the last 25 years inside the minds of the most dangerous criminals in America. As a leading profiler in the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, he had built a reputation for dissecting the psychology of serial killers, terrorists, and violent offenders. His instincts were razor-sharp, his ability to read people almost supernatural. It was what made him one of the best in the field. But with every solved case, every apprehended criminal, the weight of his career pressed heavier on him. The sleepless nights, the horrors he had witnessed, the knowledge of what humans were truly capable of, it all accumulated like an unbearable burden. Nathan told himself it was time to step away. He had done his part. He had served his country. And more than anything, he wanted to enjoy life with Serena. Serena had been patient through the years. She understood the long nights, the cases that consumed him, the nightmares he refused to talk about. But now, they had a chance to start fresh. No more crime scenes, no more endless investigations. Just the two of them, building the life they had always promised each other. At first, everything seemed perfect. Nathan took up hobbies he had neglected: reading, fishing, even gardening. They planned trips, spent long evenings together, and for the first time in years, he felt like a regular man rather than a hunter of monsters. He thought he was happy. Then, the small things began to stand out. Serena had always been affectionate, but now there was a distance between them. She would often be distracted, checking her phone more than usual. There were sudden, unexplained absences, long lunches with friends that she had never mentioned before, late nights out that never used to happen. Nathan's instincts, honed through decades of studying deception, told him something was wrong. At first, he ignored it. He wanted to believe it was just his mind adjusting to civilian life, that his hyper-awareness was playing tricks on him. But the changes in Serena's behavior weren't just in his imagination. He began to notice inconsistencies in her stories, the way she avoided eye contact when he asked her where she had been. There were whispered phone calls, sudden changes in plans, and a new energy in her that had nothing to do with their marriage. The feeling in his gut grew stronger. Something was off, and Nathan Calloway had never ignored a gut feeling in his life. One evening, as Serena stood in the kitchen, casually scrolling through her phone, Nathan watched her carefully. She was smiling at something on the screen, something that had nothing to do with him. It was in that moment that he knew. He had spent his career catching liars. Now, he was living with one. Nathan Calloway had always believed that knowledge was power. In his years as a profiler, he had studied the art of deception, the patterns of human behavior. He knew that people left trails, no matter how careful they were, and if Serena was lying to him, he would find out. The first step was observation. He started small. Casual questions about her day, about the people she met. He noted the slight hesitation in her voice, the inconsistencies in her explanations. She was careful, but not careful enough. Then he began to watch her movements. He memorized her schedule, the morning yoga classes, the afternoon coffee runs, the occasional dinner with friends. He cross-checked her stories with what he knew, and soon enough, the discrepancies became clear. One evening, while Serena was in the shower, he picked up her phone. She had never locked it before. Now, there was a passcode. That alone told him everything he needed to know. Nathan didn't panic. He didn't confront her. He simply adapted. The next day, he followed her. She left home at noon, claiming she was meeting an old college friend for lunch. Nathan tailed her from a distance, his instincts kicking in like he was on an active case. She didn't drive to the restaurant she had mentioned. Instead, she went to a high-end hotel in the city. Nathan parked across the street, watching from his car. Serena walked into the lobby with the confidence of someone who had done this before. A few minutes later, a man joined her. Daniel Mercer. Nathan recognized him immediately. A wealthy businessman, known for his high-profile real estate ventures. a man who had been in the news more than once for his calculated deals and aggressive business strategies. And now he was standing in the middle of the hotel lobby, kissing Serena. Nathan felt nothing in that moment. No shock, no anger, just clarity. He had confirmation. That night, while Serena slept beside him, Nathan made his next move. He installed a GPS tracker under the rear bumper of her car. A small, untraceable device. Something he had used countless times before in his investigations. It would log her every movement, every stop, every detour. Over the next few weeks, Nathan gathered evidence. He collected hotel receipts, surveillance footage, copies of text messages extracted from backup data. Every piece of information fit together like a puzzle, confirming the truth he already knew. Serena was having an affair, and Nathan wasn't just going to let it slide. Nathan Calloway had spent his entire career understanding killers. What drove them, what pushed them past the edge, what made them take a life. He had always believed that despite everything, he was different from the men he hunted. That he could stare into the abyss without falling in. But now, the abyss was staring back at him. He had all the evidence he needed. The GPS tracker confirmed that Serena and Daniel met regularly, always at the same hotel, sometimes at his penthouse. The bank statements revealed secret transactions, expensive gifts. The text messages, recovered through software he wasn't even supposed to have, told the whole story. Serena wasn't just cheating on him. She was planning a new life. One text from Daniel stood out. "We'll be together soon, I promise." Another from Serena. "I just need to handle things with Nathan first." Handle things. Nathan read the words over and over. He knew what they meant. Divorce. Betrayal. Losing everything. He had given up his career for her. He had chosen a quiet life, a future built on trust. And she had thrown it away for a man who hadn't earned any of it. Nathan wasn't going to let them take his life apart. Not without consequences. Killing someone wasn't about anger. It wasn't about passion. That was how people got caught. Nathan had spent years studying cases where mistakes were made, sloppy cover-ups, impulsive decisions. He wasn't going to make those mistakes. This had to be perfect. He started planning methodically. He knew their habits, their routines. He studied Daniel Mercer's security, his house, his cars, his habits. He followed Serena when she didn't even know she was being watched. He chose a night when they would be together. A night when neither of them would be expected anywhere else. He prepared everything in advance: gloves, disposable clothing, a weapon that could never be traced. He selected a secluded area where no security cameras would interfere. Nathan Calloway, the man who had spent his life tracking murderers, was about to become one. It was late when Serena and Daniel left the hotel, walking to his car in the underground parking garage. Nathan was already there. He had disabled the cameras an hour earlier, using old tricks he had learned during his time in the field. He wore a mask, gloves, every detail accounted for. Serena didn't even see it coming. As she reached for the car door, he moved quickly, pressing a cloth over her face. The chloroform worked fast. She struggled for a few seconds before her body went limp. Daniel turned in shock, too slow to react. Nathan didn't hesitate. He drove the knife into Daniel's abdomen, deep, precise, avoiding unnecessary mess. Daniel gasped, choking on his own breath. Nathan watched as the life drained from his eyes. No hesitation, no emotion, just another case, another problem solved. He loaded their bodies into the trunk. This wasn't the end. The real work was just beginning. Nathan Calloway had spent years analyzing crime scenes, picking apart the mistakes of men who thought they had committed the perfect crime. He knew where they failed. He knew how they got caught. And he wasn't about to make the same errors. There could be no loose ends. Nathan drove out of the city under the cover of darkness, taking back roads where there were no traffic cameras. He had already chosen the location, a remote stretch of dense forest nearly 2 hours away. It was land no one visited, miles away from hiking trails or hunting zones. He parked the car deep in the woods, the crunch of gravel beneath the tires the only sound in the night. The air was cold, the scent of pine thick around him. He stepped out, surveying the area with the same tactical mindset he had used on 1,000 crime scenes. He had already prepared 2 graves, digging them a day earlier when he had scouted the location. The soil had been soft enough, and he had made sure they were deep, 6 feet, just like protocol dictated. He dragged Daniel's body out first, rolling it into the hole with precision. There was no hesitation, no remorse, just efficiency. Serena was next. He paused for a moment, looking at her face in the dim light. She looked peaceful, as if she were just sleeping. A part of him, some old distant part, felt a pang of something. Regret? Grief? He couldn't tell. Then he covered the graves, packing the dirt tightly, ensuring there were no signs of disturbance. He scattered leaves, sticks, and natural debris over the area, making it look untouched. When he stepped back, it was as if no one had ever been there. The next step was crucial. Serena couldn't simply disappear. That would raise too many questions. Nathan drove her car to an abandoned parking lot outside of town, a place where stolen cars often ended up. He wiped down every surface, erasing any fingerprints. Then, using a prepaid burner phone, he sent a single text from her phone to one of her friends. "I need some time away. Please don't worry about me. I'll call soon." He knew the psychology of a missing persons case. A sudden disappearance without explanation would launch an immediate, aggressive investigation. But if someone voluntarily left, if they sent a message saying they needed space, that slowed everything down. By the time people started asking serious questions, it would be too late. Nathan methodically went through every piece of evidence that could connect him to the crime. The burner phone, smashed and thrown into a river. The gloves and clothes he wore, burned in a fire pit at an abandoned lot. The knife, taken apart, pieces dropped in separate locations. He deleted security footage from the hotel's parking garage before anyone noticed the gaps. He wiped every trace of his GPS activity, making sure his car never appeared near the burial site. By the time he was done, it was as if Daniel and Serena had simply vanished. Nathan went home, showered, and went to bed. The next morning, he woke up as the grieving husband. He called a few of Serena's friends, asking if they had heard from her. He played the concerned spouse, the man desperate for answers. He filed a missing persons report. And then he waited. The police would investigate. They would search. But he knew how the system worked. Without evidence, without a crime scene, without a body, there was no case. Weeks passed. Then months. The world moved on. Nathan Calloway had committed the perfect crime. Or so he thought. Nathan Calloway had spent years working with law enforcement, consulting on high-profile cases, training agents on how to read criminals. Now, he found himself on the other side of the table. Only this time, he wasn't the one asking the questions. Serena's disappearance didn't go unnoticed. At first, her friends were worried but not panicked. The text message he had sent from her phone did exactly what it was supposed to. It bought time. Some believed she had left to clear her head. Others speculated about stress in her marriage. No one suspected foul play. For the first week, Nathan played his part well. He called friends, asked if they had seen her, and even visited places she used to go, carefully making sure he was seen as a concerned husband rather than a suspect. But as days turned into weeks with no sign of her, the police had no choice but to get involved. Detective Laura Monroe, a seasoned investigator with a local police department, took the lead. She was sharp, methodical, and persistent, qualities Nathan immediately recognized. He had worked with detectives like her before. She wasn't one to let things go easily. Monroe questioned him twice in the first month. "Mr. Calloway, when was the last time you saw Serena?" "The night before she disappeared," Nathan had answered. "She said she needed some time to herself." "And you weren't concerned?" "Of course I was, but she's an adult. She's left before when she needed space." It was the perfect answer. Enough concern to appear genuine, but not so much that it seemed like he was covering something up. The investigation followed all the usual steps. The police traced Serena's phone, but it had been turned off after the final text message. They checked traffic cameras, but none showed her leaving the city. They interviewed friends, co-workers, and even Daniel Mercer's business associates. Nathan knew what they would find. Nothing. Daniel Mercer's disappearance complicated things. Initially, there was no connection between him and Serena, but the police eventually discovered their affair. Monroe questioned Nathan again. "Were you aware your wife was having an affair with Daniel Mercer?" Nathan had played it perfectly, acting shocked, hurt, betrayed. "No, I had no idea." He let the detective see his pain, his confusion. "You think she ran off with him?" he had asked. Monroe wasn't sure. That was the problem. Two people disappearing at the same time wasn't a simple missing persons case anymore. It was a mystery. But there was no crime scene, no evidence of foul play. The investigation slowed. The media covered it briefly, speculating about Serena and Daniel's disappearance. But with no leads, the story faded. Nathan waited. 6 months passed. Serena and Daniel were just another pair of missing persons. Nathan Calloway had done it. He had committed the perfect crime. He had erased them, covered every trace. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to breathe. And then, the first sign came. A plain white envelope. Left in his mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Nathan stared at it, his heart hammering in his chest. It was a picture of a disturbed grave. Someone had been digging. And they had found something. Nathan Calloway had always been in control. Every decision, every move he made was calculated. But as he stared at the photograph in his hands, a cold, unfamiliar sensation crept up his spine. Someone knew. The picture was printed on standard photo paper, the edges crisp. It had been taken at night, but the flash had illuminated just enough. The uneven dirt, the indentation in the ground, the unmistakable shape of a disturbed grave. The grave. His grave. The one where he had buried Serena and Daniel. Nathan's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain still. He looked around his quiet suburban street. Nothing seemed out of place. No strange cars. No lingering figures. Whoever had left the envelope had done so without being seen. Taking a slow breath, he stepped back inside and locked the door behind him. The phone rang late that night. A number with no caller ID. Nathan hesitated for only a second before answering. Silence. Then, a faint breath on the other end. Nathan. His grip tightened around the phone. The voice was distorted, barely above a whisper. "Did you think it was over?" Nathan remained silent, his mind racing. Voice changer. Pre-recorded message. Who was playing this game? The call ended before he could respond. Nathan stared at the screen, the empty number flashing for a second before disappearing. His jaw tightened. This wasn't possible. No one should have found the grave. No one should have known where to look. He had covered every detail, erased every trace. Unless someone had been watching. Nathan didn't sleep that night. By morning, his rational mind took over. There were only two possibilities. Someone had stumbled upon the site by accident. Someone knew exactly what they were looking for. Either way, they were taunting him, testing him. The next move was his. He drove out to the burial site that night, parking a quarter-mile away and making the rest of the trip on foot. The forest was silent, the cold air thick with damp earth. When he reached the clearing, he saw it. A single hole. Not deep, just enough to disturb the surface, as if someone had started digging but stopped. Next to it, half buried in the dirt, was something that made his blood run cold. A strand of blonde hair. Serena's. Whoever was doing this wasn't just trying to scare him. They wanted him to know Serena wasn't gone. Not completely. Nathan scanned the darkness, his heartbeat steady but fast. He wasn't afraid. He had seen worse. But this wasn't a case anymore. This was personal. Someone had found his secret. And they weren't done. Nathan Calloway had spent years studying the human mind, fear, deception, manipulation. He had seen men unravel under the pressure of their own crimes. He knew the symptoms of paranoia, the slow, creeping feeling that something was closing in. But this wasn't paranoia. This was real. Someone had found the grave. Someone had left him a message. And now, someone was watching. The second envelope arrived 2 days later. This time, it was slid under his front door. No sound, no footsteps, nothing caught on his security cameras. Just a plain white envelope waiting for him. Nathan opened it carefully. Inside was another photograph. His hands tightened as he studied the image. It was Serena, standing in the woods, alive. Nathan's mind rejected what he was seeing. It wasn't possible. He had watched her die. He had buried her. But there she was. The photo was grainy, taken from a distance, but it was undeniably her. Same long blonde hair, same sharp features, same knowing smile. Beneath the picture, a single line was written in red ink. "Come find me." Nathan knew it was a trap. He went anyway. The coordinates were sent to his phone later that night. Another blocked number. Another silent taunt. He drove in silence, gripping the wheel, his mind a battlefield of logic and instinct. There was no way Serena was alive. No way. The alternative was worse. Someone was playing a game with him. Someone who knew everything. He parked outside the forest, moving on foot. His gun was tucked into his waistband, his body tense, every step calculated. And then he saw her. Standing in the clearing. Serena. She turned slowly, her face illuminated by the moonlight. She wasn't just alive. She was waiting. Nathan's breath came slow and steady, but inside, something in him cracked. "You're not real." His voice was calm, measured. Serena tilted her head, smiling. "You always thought you knew everything, Nathan. But you missed something, didn't you?" She took a step closer. Nathan didn't move. "I buried you." The smile widened. "Then why am I here?" The world around him felt distant, his mind grasping for an explanation. A trick? A twin? A setup? Then, a sound behind him. A sharp movement. Pain exploded in the back of his skull. The last thing he saw was Serena watching him. Smiling. And then, darkness. Nathan Calloway woke to the sound of dripping water. His head pounded, a deep, throbbing ache radiating from the back of his skull. The air was damp, thick with the scent of earth and something metallic. He blinked, vision blurring, then sharpening. He was underground. The walls were packed dirt. A single dim bulb flickered overhead, casting long, eerie shadows. His hands were bound behind him, his ankles tied to the legs of a rusted chair. Panic didn't come. Nathan had been in worse situations. He tested the restraints. Tight. Professional. Whoever had done this knew what they were doing. A voice broke the silence. "You look good, Nathan." He lifted his head. Serena. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She was alive. Not a hallucination. Not a trick. Nathan's mind moved fast, calculating. If she was here, if she was standing in front of him then, "I killed you." His voice was steady. Serena smiled. "You tried." She walked closer, the heels of her boots kicking against the packed dirt. But even you can't be perfect, Nathan. You missed something. Nathan's jaw clenched. The grave. She nodded. You thought I was unconscious when you buried me. You thought you had done everything right. She leaned down, her face inches from his. But I woke up, Nathan. I woke up underground. He exhaled slowly. That should have been impossible. You were drugged, he said. Your body shouldn't have been able to. Shock is a funny thing, she interrupted. Adrenaline. Survival instinct. Nathan had seen cases like this before. People buried alive who clawed their way out, surviving against all odds. It was rare, but not impossible. Serena straightened, tilting her head. Did you ever wonder why I didn't go to the police? Nathan didn't answer. Because this isn't about justice, she said, stepping back. It's about you. About what you did. She turned to the shadows. Bring him in. Footsteps echoed. Nathan lifted his gaze as a second figure stepped forward. Daniel Mercer. Alive. Bruised. Thin. But alive. Nathan's pulse remained steady, but his mind reeled. He had seen Daniel die. He had felt the blade sink into his flesh. Daniel knelt in front of him, smiling. Miss me? Nathan didn't respond. You were thorough, Daniel said. I'll give you that. But you made one mistake. Serena crouched beside Daniel. You didn't make sure we were dead. Nathan finally spoke. Then why wait 6 months? Serena's smile widened. Because killing you wouldn't have been enough. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a syringe. The liquid inside was clear, the needle gleaming under the flickering light. You wanted to disappear, Nathan. So that's exactly what's going to happen. Daniel grinned. We're going to make sure you're never found. Nathan exhaled slowly, his mind already working through escape options. Serena stepped forward, pressing the needle against his arm. Let's see how you like being buried alive. She pushed the plunger. Darkness swallowed him whole.